Sing.
But also if I need to unmute, and I unmuted.
Oh, you were muted?
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Gonna need somebody to lean on.
Thank you, Jean and Scott, for that beautiful rendition of Comfort Me and Lean on Me. Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Harding, and I'm a member of the Worship and Music Committee. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day weekend as we remember all those who have died in the service of our country and all of those United States citizens, 100,000 nearly now, who have passed due to COVID. The first half of our service will be recorded and posted on Facebook. The portion of after the benediction where we do the candles of joys and concerns, that is not recorded. Our service today is led by our minister, Reverend Art Lavoie. I hope that everyone has a few extra minutes to join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour, which usually runs between 11 and 11:30. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever you believe, wherever you are on your journey, come walk with us this hour. Our morning service will now begin. I'm going to start with our call to worship by Nancy Schaefer. The only question large enough is to ask. I'm going to begin again. The only question large enough is how to give thanks for our lives. That's the beginning. Large enough thanks. Please join in singing hymn number 22, Dear Weaver of Our Lives.
Whose patterns are away. Good morning, everyone. As I light the chalice this morning, please join with me in saying the words that are on your screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
We have two readings this morning. The first one is A Year to Live, which is an excerpt from Stephen Levine. If you only had 1 year to live, what would you do? When we ask ourselves this question, myriad possibilities arise. We spin through the full range of our fantasies, from orgies to monasteries and back again. Even on first reflection, it becomes painfully obvious that the psychological momentum of our approaching demise propels a heavy wind before it. In the wind tumble the fallen leaves of our abandoned dreams and thwarted melodies. It chills us to the marrow. The question reminds us of how much we have forgotten. A part of us begins to panic at the thought that it hasn't had quite enough time to leave something valid behind. There have been so few moments when life was all it was cracked up to be. So much that might have been different had the heart not been obstructed by fear. As we see where we have been absent from life, increasing possibilities audition for our approval. The heart suggests that we become more present, that we sharpen our focus. When death, the big wind, blows out our birthday candles, only the wish remains, and only that longing which deepens our wisdom and compassion will be of much use. As the future rapidly becomes the present and the present condenses into the past, how do we stay fully alive each day? The second reading is from Mary Oliver, When Death Comes. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does towards silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. And when it's over, I don't want to wonder if I had made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world.
voice is heard, 'tis the ancestors' breath, in the voice of the waters and light. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not part of the earth. They are in the rustling trees, they are in the groaning woods, they are in the crying grass, they are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not part of the earth. So listen more often to things and to beings. Listen more often to things and to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast, they are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes, they are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things and to beings. Oh, listen more often to things and to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water.
In the Boston Sunday Globe magazine on March 22nd, in the final article every week, there's a section called Connections. And there was this article by Linda Machin in which she wrote about her friend Shirley, who was 88 when she died just before Christmas. Shirley was a widow who'd grown up in New Zealand and had no children. Without any family in the area, it fell on Linda and a few other close friends to let people know of her death, arrange a memorial service, and dispose of her belongings. Linda writes that she sometimes felt sorry for Shirley, who was hopelessly out of step with the times. She still used a rotary phone, didn't even own a clothes dryer, and denounced computers as just one more thing to go wrong in the house. The memorial service, to Linda's surprise, was packed with people. Everyone I spoke to, she writes, had experienced Shirley's particular brand of slow friendship. Neighbors spoke of how she watched their homes and collected their mail when they were away. She may have had no use for social media, but she kept us connected to one another, sharing updates and news. She took long daily walks around the neighborhood and, unencumbered by devices or earbuds, cheerfully engaged everyone she met, even children and dogs. Now there's a life that will be fondly remembered, and I think it's one I would like to learn from. The crisis and anxiety we face around this pandemic has reminded us of the fragility of life. I don't know about you, but I am more aware of my own mortality these days. And I think this next year will be a time to think about these last phases, these last years of my life, and what might be most important. As a minister, I have been at the bedside of people who were ill and dying, and talked with them about their lives, their families, their greatest accomplishments, and their regrets. I have been to numerous wakes and officiated at many funerals and memorial services. I've spoken to many family members to prepare those services and heard stories, some like Shirley's, some, unfortunately, not. I have held the hands of both my mother and my brother Alan when they took their last breath. So I recognize that because of these experiences, I may be more comfortable with death and mortality than some of you who are here this morning. I'd suggest, though, that at some point in our lives, it's important to face our own mortality so that we can make decisions about how we want to live, and so that at our life's end, we are not carrying a lot of guilt or regret. So I invite everyone to take a moment to breathe. I invite all of us to focus our awareness on the feelings, the memories, the thoughts, and the ideas that might be coming up for you. What is your own experience of death and mortality? What anxieties might be raised for you, and what are you most afraid of with this conversation? Breathe into your thoughts, your fears, and your anxieties. And as you breathe out, see if you can release them. Several years ago, the minister study group that I was in decided to read and discuss Stephen Levine's book, A Year to Live. And our reading this morning, one of them was taken from that book. Levine was a poet, a writer, and teacher who specialized in the area of death and dying. And he decided to structure a whole year of his life with a spiritual practice of imagining that he had been given a terminal diagnosis and that it was his last year to live. Reading, studying, and discussing this book turned out to be an uplifting and joyful experience for me and my colleagues, much more so than we had imagined. In the introduction to the book, Levine says that this is a book of renewal, that it's not simply about dying, but about the restoration of the heart, which happens when we confront our life and our death with mercy and awareness. He writes that many people who receive a terminal diagnosis feel as though they've been given a new chance to come to terms with their lives, to realize what's most important, and to let go of what does not have real value. They learn to go about living their lives with more meaning. Now, many of us will have more sudden death experiences or will be too ill in the final months to do much about the quality of our living. So I think it's a good idea for us, in Levine's words, to practice dying. Some of the world's great thinkers, from Socrates to the Dalai Lama, have included preparation for death in the course of their living. Now, many of us do bits of that by having wills and medical proxies, and perhaps having some funeral arrangements prepared in advance. But most of us don't use that as a time to really re-examine our living. In some Buddhist circles, in fact, death is not seen as an end of life, but as the completion of our birth. The completion of the journey that began when we first arrived on this planet in this particular form of consciousness. We may have been here before, and we may be here again, but we will never again experience this time and this place, in this body, in this moment in history. What would it be like for all of us to be able to see death as the completion of our story, the completion of our birth? What decisions and plans and relationships would become most important? What would we need to let go of in order to give this year or this time in our lives the most meaning? What kind of legacy would we like to leave behind, and how could we best accomplish that? So I'd also like this morning to give another kind of meaning, another twist to the phrase, a year to live. For I think this next year will be like no other that we have experienced. It appears that we are likely to have to continue wearing masks and practicing social distancing. And it is likely that we will be unable to meet in person on Sunday mornings for at least another year. I know that Governor Baker has said that houses of worship could start meeting this weekend with proper procedures in place. But here are the facts of what we know today. Medical experts have said that any form of choral or communal singing constitutes a super spreader event because of the ways we project when we sing. So if we met in person, we would not be able to sing or to have a choir. And we would have to wear masks. And with the social distancing requirements, if we were meeting here in the chapel, probably only 10 people would be able to attend. And certainly I don't think that any of us are eager to have me standing before you preaching with a mask on. That would be kind of weird, and it'd be all muffled and you wouldn't know what I was saying. Even if they find a vaccine, there's not likely to be enough doses for everyone before the fall and winter flu season starts up, during which all public health experts are predicting a resurgence of the coronavirus. Jessica Clay, my ministerial colleague in Brewster, has said that none of us should gather together until all of us can. I think that's a wonderful testament to our Universalist heritage. Having to say this to you this morning breaks my heart. I miss seeing all of you in person, as I know you miss seeing each other. But I've discussed this with the Worship and Music Committee and the Parish Committee, and we all agree that our safety is more important, at least for this foreseeable future. Even though this is going to be a crazy, lonely, and fearful year that we now face, we will find ways to build and continue our connections with each other, to explore meaningful thoughts and ideas, to develop deeper spiritual resources. And we're gonna find time and ways to have fun together. And I'm also suggesting this morning that this next year would be a good time to review our lives and to discern more deeply what is most important. Let's ask ourselves, each and every one of us, what we need to do more intentionally in order to make our lives more healthy and whole. What do our lives need to look like so that we can face the end of our days and know that we have no unfinished business and have left a legacy of love and gratitude and compassion. Here's another quote from the story I started the sermon with from the Boston Sunday Globe. Linda Machin writes, "Since Shirley died, I thought a lot about how I live my life, hurried and frazzled, conversations reduced to emojis, rarely less than 2 tasks at a time. I keep threatening to take up my old hobbies, do jigsaw puzzles, read a whole book, text less, breathe more. But it never seems to happen. Shirley may have listened to classical music every night on an ancient console turntable, but she was practicing mindfulness before it was a thing. She knew that life was less about the tasks you do than about those precious moments in between." I'd like to close this morning with a wonderful 12th century poem. It's been in one place where I've seen it, it says it's anonymous, and another place it says it's attributed to Judah Halaby. "'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, to love, to hope, to dream, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools, this love, but a holy thing to love what death can touch. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was a gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death can touch." Amen, and blessed be. Please join in singing our closing hymn, "Blessed Spirit of My Life."
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through Help me live with dignity and deep serenity. Fill me with adoration, clear my mind of fear and confusion. When my thoughts flow restlessly, let peace find a home in me. Spirit of great mystery, hear the still small voice in me. Help me live my word is free, as I comfort those in need. Fill me with compassion, be the source of my intuition. Then when life is done for me, let love be my legacy.
Let us remember the words from the end of Mary Oliver's poem. You know, Mary Oliver was the quintessential UU poet. Most of her books were published by our own UU Beacon Press, and she was a keynote speaker in the Ware Lecture at General Assembly a few years ago, shortly before her own death. The last line of her poem, she writes, "I don't want to end up simply having visited this world." And let that be a legacy for all of us, that we also, like Mary, want to be a bride married to amazement and the bridegroom taking the world in our arms. We want to make of our time here something meaningful, and when it's time to leave, to know that we have no regrets. Amen, and blessed be.